Hello guys, I gave an interview in a company called Bizionic Technology and Marketing Solution, and that company is based on the Hyderabad. And the interview date was the May 2, 2025, 2nd May 2025. So this is my first round of interview, and they asked me what is the yeah. First of all, they told me that this interview will be based on the Laravel, Coding Nighter, and Symfony. These all are the PHP frameworks. So they asked me what is the boot and patch in Laravel. So first of all, I said that the boot method is commonly found in service provider, located in the app service provider, or other custom service provider. So they asked what is the purpose of the boot. I said used to run code after all services have been registered. You can bind events, macros, or perform configuration setup here. So for example, you have a function boot, and then you have the blade double colon directive hello function, then return PHP echo hello words. Okay, so they ask me what is the eloquent model. I said used to register model listeners like the creating, updating, and deleting. Okay, so now comes to the patch. They ask me patch. So patch is typically used in routing or HTTP request. So routing is inside the web.php and then api.php. So used with defining a route that handle an HTTP patch request, often the partial updates. For example, routes double colon patch user ID, user controller class and update. So HTTP request client side with the access or Laravel HTTP client. So example using Laravel HTTP client. So use eliminate support for hard HTTP response HTTP double colon patch, then example.com API user 1. So name journal. So summary is for the boot and patch. So context user service provider or eloquent model, that is the boot. Okay, and the use initializing binding macros and events. So this is the work of the boot method. And patch, that is the HTTP method for routes or HTTP request. So boot is related to service provider or eloquent model, and patch is related to routes for the HTTP request perform partial update. Okay, they ask me what is the ORM in Laravel. So ORM stand for the object relational mapping in Laravel. The ORM called the eloquent. So what is the eloquent ORM? Eloquent is a Laravel built-in ORM that allows you to interact with your database tables as PHP object, making database operational, simple, and readable. So each database table has a corresponding model in Laravel. So Eloquent makes you code cleaner, reduce SQL writing, and integrates tightly with Laravel feature. Then with this question they asked me what is the MVC. So I said the MVC is a model view controller, is a design pattern that separate an application into three controller. So basically MVC is a design pattern. So model manages data and database logic. View handles UI and display data, and controller manage request and business logic. So model means data, view is display, and controller is business logic. So explain each component of MVC with example like model, which is handling for the database user.php fetch users from database. View display data users.php show user list. Controller manage logic user controller.php calls model and send data to view. So how does MVC work in PHP? So user request a URL users, or router direct request to the controller user controller index. Then controller calls model user get all models. Model fetches data from the DB or database. Controller sends data to the view, that is users.php, and view display the data. So the summary is model is data, view is display, and controller is logic. They asked me load model in Code Igniter. So I said in Code Igniter, loading a model allows you to interact with the database using clean, organized code similar to how ORM works in other framework. So they asked me how to load a model in Code Igniter. So I said in Code Igniter 3 autoload via autoload.php, like the autoload model and array user model. Okay. Second is load in controller. Class user extend CI controller, public function construct, parent construct, this load model user model. Okay. Then public function index data user, this user model get all users, and this load view user list data. So model 5 application model and user model.php. So class user model extend CI model, public function get all users, return this db get users result. So this is in the Code Igniter 3. In Code Igniter 4, load using service locator or dependency injection. So example in controller. So public function index data new user model, data user is equal to model find all, return view user underscore list data. Okay. So model file is there in the user model.php, which is inside the models and app. So user, so protected table users and protected allow field name and email. So summary is for CI3 this load model, and syntax is okay, this user model and function name. In CI4 new model class and then model find all find save. They ask me the validation in Code Igniter. Okay, that I will discuss later. Fifth one is the DD or die and dump. Okay, so DD or die, DD in Laravel, DD stands for the dump and die. So use DD during, so this, what is the tip for that? Use DD during development only. Avoid leaving DD in the production code. It halts the execution and expose data. They asked me what is the authentication versus authorization. So authentication is a process of verifying the identity of a user. It checks who is the user is. Okay, so verifications, the system checks who user is. So step for the authentication, login. A user provides their credential, username and password. Verification, the system checks if the provided credential match stored credential in database or third party authentication service. So token generation, that is optional. Upon successful login, a system may generate a token to maintain the session or facilitate API access. Example, a user logs in using their username and password, and the system verifies the credentials and grants access if the information is correct. So example in Laravel, auth attempt email request email password request password. Second is the what is the authorization. So authorization is the process of determining what the user can do after they authenticated. So first is the authentication, second is the authorization. It controls the permission and access level assigned to the user. Step for authorization. Permission check. After authentication, the system checks if the authentication user has permission to perform a specific action. For example, view a page, modify a resource, etc. Roles and permissions. In many system roles, admin, editor, user define which action are allowed. Permission specify the specific action, create, delete, edit that a user can perform. Example, a user may authenticated, but they might only be authorized to view their own profile, not other user profile. A manager role may allow the editing posts, while a guest role may only be viewing. So example in Laravel, If auth double colon user can edit post, then perform the action. So authentication versus authorization summary is authentication. Verify who the user is. In authorization determines what the user can do. In authentication, identify login credential. In authorization, permission, roles and abilities. In authentication, ensure that the user is who they claim to be. In authorization, ensures the user has the right to access resources or perform actions. In authentication, user login in with the username password. Authorization user being assigned roles like the admin, editor and etc. So the bottom line is authorization for the login and password, and authentication is for the username and password, and authorization is for the role given to them. Okay. So practical use in a typical web app, authentication would occur first. Login in authorization would follow the ensure that the authenticate user had correct permission to access the specific resource. They ask me what is the database seeding in Laravel. So database seeding in Laravel is a way to populate your database with dummy or sample data, useful for testing, development or initial setups. So database seeding is essential about the inserting data into your database, often for testing, development or initial setup. In Laravel, this is done using the seeders, which are special classes designed to insert predefined or random data into database tables. Yet, service provider, bootstrapping, register service, service cut. Answer. In Laravel, service provider are the central place where you bind classes, interface and functionality to the Laravel service container. They are the core mechanism for bootstrapping your application and making it ready to use. So common use cases for service providers. So binding classes or interface to the container, useful for dependency injection. Configuration loading, registering the configuration file into the application. Event listening, register events and their listeners. Middlewares, register custom middlewares. Routing, register routes in the boot method. So this is the service providers working. So publishing assets, making assets like configuration files, views, okay, publishable. A service provider class has two main methods, register and boot. So register used to bind service into the Laravel service container. You typically register binding on configuration here. That is boot method. Used to perform tasks that are needed for all services have been registered. You typically use this method for tasks like registering routes, registering event listener and configuring settings or running setup tasks. Summary of service provider register. Bind service to the container. Boot. Execute task when the application boots. Used to manage dependency and configuration services. So essential for the extending Laravel core functionality. They asked me what is the latest version of CodeIgniter, so I said 4. So the specific is 4.6. They asked me what is the latest version of Laravel, so I said 12. Okay, so that is no. She told that 12. I said 12. That time I could not recall. So difference between Laravel and CodeIgniter. So answer, use case recommendation. Laravel is ideal when you need rapid development with lots of built-in features. You want a rich ecosystem, queues, jobs, even API support. You are working on a large or scalable application, then you can use the Laravel. In CodeIgniter, you want a lightweight framework with less overhead. You are building small to medium apps or API quickly. You need fine control without a steep learning curve. So I skip one question, okay, that I want to share. Okay, so I got that question now. they ask me validation. Just a second. Yeah. Mm, they asked me validation in code igniter. They asked me validation in code igniter. So yeah, so I got it. So in controller we have like define validation rule. Username require min length 3, max length 12. So this is for the username. So these are the rules. Email require valid email. Password require minimum length. Okay. So these are the validation this thing in our code igniter. So I will share more interview question. Till then, bye.